Welcome to Podcast for Fun. This is the show where we dive into the passion, the process, and the journeys of creative storytellers as they bring their stories to life. I am your host, Sophia, and today we are joined by a talented author and cartoonist, Trung Le Nguyen. Thank you so much for being here, Trung.
Thanks so much for having me. This will be fun.
So let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your career and your works.
Okay, sure. So I am an author and a cartoonist. I have not been doing this for a super long time. Like I think I've been doing comics for the past 7-ish years or so, really. And I've always drawn, but I actually went to school for art history and for like oil painting. And I don't do oil painting anymore, really, because it requires, the proper space and you have to have ventilation, and I don't want to lose my brain cells to all of the fumes from the paint.
Yeah.
So I went in a different direction. I mostly wanted to do art history and I wanted to do kind of arts administration work when I was in college because I am a first generation immigrant. And so, like, my parents were always very supportive of whatever it was that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
We're Vietnamese American. And so I came over when I was very little. And so, growing up, even though my parents were very encouraging, I had it in my head that I needed to do the most practical possible thing. And I didn't know how to make money in the arts. And so I was like, well, I know how, like, generally people get money in terms of like working in offices. And so what is an office where I can work around art? And so I decided to go into art history instead. And I love kind of picking apart American culture and sort of being like a little anthropologist kind of to kind of figure out how we got where we got because it wasn't a culture that I grew up understanding very well. So I like to reverse engineer an
Mm.
understanding of the culture in which I find myself. And so art history also seemed perfect for that. But so one of the stumbling blocks to that was when I was in college, one of the requirements for my graduation was that I needed to get an internship in my field of study. And so I got a fantastic internship at I'm from Minnesota. And so I got an internship at the Minnesota Historical Society. And that was really exciting for me because it was so perfect. I got to do museum work. I was actually specifically tasked with putting together a dossier of information for the history actors who would like pretend to be historical figures.
Mhm.
And so they would be dressed up in costume, and then people like kids would come in for their field trips and they would dress up as these characters, and I would put together information about who these people were. And so the character that I got, the historical figure that I got, was Harriet Bishop, the first school teacher in Minnesota. But partway through my internship session that summer, the government shut down because they couldn't agree on a budget. And so I lost my internship because I was considered non-essential personnel. And so I was like, oh no, my graduation status is in danger. I'm gonna like, my future is completely bunk. I don't know what to do. And so I just started posting cartoons on the internet and on Tumblr because I guess that's what you do when you feel like your life is falling apart. But I started to really like to do that, and it felt really satisfying to work in short form because I was so used to doing big paintings and I like telling stories. And I used my art history knowledge to kind of get a better sense for why I like to draw the way that I do. And if you've seen my work, it looks sort of unusual in terms of like comics. I have this very specific fairy tale aesthetic because most of the art historical work that I looked at was focused on children's book at the turn of the century. So, like in the Gilded Age, the golden age of illustration was where I looked at. And so, a lot of my cartooning work actually looks a little bit like cartoons from that era. But I also read a lot of manga growing up, and so that made its way into my work too. So yeah, no, I've just kind of found work like small projects here and there. After college, I got a day job that I was very happy to work at for about 5 years. And then at some point I decided I want to make a graphic novel. I want to work in books. I want to be published. And so I put together a little like a little packet of information and a pitch document for a project that I wanted to work on. And then I talked to some agents, got myself representation, and then we got that project shopped around to different publishers. And then I got my book published. My debut graphic novel came out in 2020, and my second one comes out later this year. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Sorry, that
That's
was
so
very,
cool
very
though.
long.
No, that was so cool. I was like, oh my God, this is interesting. Really being like entranced, you know.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Why did you wait? What does an art administrator even entail?
Well, arts administration is just basically when you work for any institution that kind of supports the arts or works around it. So in museums, that would sort of just be like if you do any kind of curatorial work and you sort of facilitate relationships between the community and with like other art historians or artists. If you work in a gallery, you'd be the person who is like doing the paperwork and like making sure everybody gets paid. Like a lot of the
Yeah.
the administrative work around making the arts happen in your community is sort of what I'm talking about.
Okay, okay. Then
Yeah,
why
I
did you
wanted to be a desk jockey essentially.
the accountant of art, or it sounds more like,
Pretty
what was
much.
it, not humanities, HR? I don't know what
Yeah,
the
kind
long
of.
terms mean.
Yeah, just like an office position somewhere in an institution that supports the arts.
So what was that day job you were doing before you were like, "Ah, I need to make comics now?"
I was actually working in so I was doing office work. Like I was an office assistant for an organization that works in children's mental health and autism services. So it was like way out of my field of
I was
expertise,
just gonna
but it was
say.
like but it was just a job essentially. But I was there for like 5 years. I did a decent job for a while, and then I got really, really burnt out because I was doing comics and that job at the same time. And
Mm.
so there were weeks where I would work up to like 70 hours a week. Like I just didn't get out much. Like looking back, I don't know how I had the energy to do that because I just don't like I was much, much younger. And so I like
Yeah.
felt like I could do all of these things and I was very passionate about it. And it didn't feel like work until the end of the day hit me and I hit a wall and I was like, oh, I need to go to bed. But yeah, no, it was a lot of grinding, a lot of hard work.
Was there like an epiphany that hit you where you were like, because how did you go from doing that hospital work, autism children work, to like suddenly being like, oh my gosh, I need to make a comic. I need to publish my own. Like, what, did something
Oh my
happen?
gosh. Well, I think it was just like I was like, well, this isn't my career, right? Like this is just a job and I like the people that I work with and I like the work that I'm doing in general, but like I'm starting to get really worn out and I need to pick a direction. And I decided that I was like at a point in my life where I felt comfortable doing something risky.
Mhm.
And like I had the support of my family and like I wasn't like I was living with my parents at the time because I was just out of college. And so I felt like I could do this. Like this is something that I feel safe doing right now.
Mm.
And so I like kind of asked around. As a matter of fact, like I didn't know how to put together a pitch document when I started talking to agents. That was the first thing where I was like, if I want to do this professionally, I need to have someone to advocate for me because I
Yeah.
don't know what the industry is like and I don't know how to like be my own champion in spaces where I'm working with people that intimidate me and people who have been
Yeah.
there for a really long time. And so I decided that I'm going to go get an agent. And so I treated it like a job interview process where like I emailed a bunch of different agents that may or may not have been available at the time. Some of them had it on their websites that they weren't taking queries at the moment, but that they could later on. And I would send an email anyway that was like, I read your thing and I don't need you to get back to me. I just want to put my hat in the ring because I think that your work really would the people that you represent would really gel well with my work. And so it seems kind of appropriate for me to be in your stable. So if you have any time, get back to me later. And I just didn't expect any like responses, but I got a few and I interviewed some agents. And whenever I got like a positive response from an agent, I would go and find all of the different people that they represented and I would email them and say like, hey, like, how was your experience working with this agent? Do you feel like they advocate for you properly? Do you feel like all of your questions are answered? Like, what is their working style? What is that like? Because it's really important for me to manage my professional expectations when I'm working with people in this capacity. So they were very generous with their time, and the authors tended to answer all of my questions, and I got a really good idea of what it was that I was looking for, and then. Actually one of the agents that was closed to queries at the time became my agent. She emailed me back and she was like, yeah, I'm technically closed, but your work seems interesting. Let's see what we can do. And so she kind of like helped me to like refine the pitch document that I presented to her. And a pitch document, the way that I like to explain it to students is that a pitch
Yeah.
document is like it's sort of like a book report for a book that doesn't exist yet, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to make sure that editors understand that you have like a full grasp of the entire scope of your project. You have to have like some of the character design, some sample pages, the like the script, like as an example of the script, like I didn't have the full script for my project completely worked out yet, but I had a complete outline. I wanted to like I had a really clear idea of what the characters' arcs were going to be. And that really kind of helped sell the story a little bit better. Like you can't treat it like a web comic because you kind of have to have everything almost completed, except for the actual pages part. And so we put together that pitch document and she sent it out to a bunch of editors. We had some conversations back and forth, and then we went with the publishing house that felt the most appropriate for me and would pay me the most like substantial amount of money for my advance that I felt was like okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my agent was really sweet in that at the very beginning of our professional relationship, she said like, "Hey, like I'm not like like a new and hungry agent. Like I'm not gonna make like huge. I'm not trying to make huge waves. I don't have anything to prove." And I was like, "That's great. I don't need people who are gonna take huge risks with me right now. Like I'm very new to this and I'm kind of sensitive." But it ended up being great. Like I had a fantastic debut. I my book is like homework for a lot of students, which I feel weird about. But it's been really fantastic and it's taken me all over the world. Like it's gotten a lot of different language territories. Like there's a Korean edition, Italian, French, Brazilian, Portuguese. Like I've been able to book tour in a lot of places that I've never been to before and travel internationally, which was not something that I was expecting out of this job. And I got really good at public speaking because I ended up having to talk to students a lot. So over the course of this kind of journey through comics and through traditional publishing, the shape of my life has changed really, really drastically, and it's been very cool.
That's my dream, man. I want that to happen to me. I
It's
wanna,
fun. It's so like it's weird to explain it because I feel like I do have a lot of really great skills that lend itself to this job pretty well, but a lot of it is very like I think I got very lucky oftentimes too. So it's it's a weird job.
so like, how long did it take for you to find that agent who's like, ah, your stuff is cool?
Honestly, it only took me a few weeks because I'm pretty like I was pretty efficient about like okay, this is like I made like a list of all the agents I was going to send stuff out to, and the ones that didn't get back to me right away, like I expected because they were closed to queries, and a lot of the other ones were pretty like on the ball, like they were very good, and it did help too that like what kickstarted that journey was that an agent reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I might want to represent your work maybe because I like these other works." And I was like, if you are interested in me, I should not take the first offer and I should ask around and see if there are other people who might be interested, who might, have like who might be a better fit for me.
Mm.
And so I did that. But yeah, no, that's kind of how I approached it. I was very serious minded about it. I was like, I'm going to use all the skills that I went to college for. Um, and yeah, I think that helped a lot. But that process for me actually didn't take very long. But that's, as I understand it, very unusual. Like a lot of authors, even in prose and in comics, like both, like sometimes take a lot of time to find the right agent. Sometimes they find their first agent and then it turns out to be not a great fit. And then they have to sort of end that professional relationship and move on to another one. And it can be very thorny. And so I've been very lucky in that the first agent that I felt like was really um, congruent with my work and my vision is the same person who represents my work now.
Hmm. But I think that's kind of smart though, that you're like, ah, no, I'm too good, not like I'm good enough that I can be picky, you know?
Mhm.
Why do you think that first agent like came to you? Was it because of the comics you're posting?
Yeah, no, it was because of the comics that I was posting online. And by then I'd already gotten some small jobs at like I'd done some work for DC Comics. I had before I got my agent, I'd already done some work for with other writers for like DC Pride and like I the editors there are so sweet because they're like aware that I like had a day job at the time. I did not want to commit to like a monthly comic schedule or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that my work looks unusual for superhero comics, and so I didn't have any designs on working in comics like monthly comics full time.
Mm.
But whenever they felt like there was a project that was appropriate, for my work or my aesthetic looked like it would be good for a particular author, for like a really short, like 20-page stint at a time, they would reach out to me and say like, "Hey, do you want to do some interiors?" And so I was able to do that, and I've gotten to like write short stories for them too occasionally. And so it was kind of nice. Like I got a combination of like interiors and some cover work for them, and so kind of going from there, I had a stable portfolio already. And so the
Yeah.
agent kind of already knew, like I had a website or like I had like an Instagram. So people kind of knew what my work looked like already, which helps manage expectations.
Yeah, yeah. So you had your social media and
Mhm.
also you work for like DC. Like they came to you, right? Based off of your social media?
Yeah, mostly. Like I don't think I ever like reached out. And I think a huge part of getting my foot in the door is that there were some very kind authors, like some writers who are like, I think your work looks really cool. I'm going to see if I can't put your name out there to some editors because I want to work with you on this short project. And
Mm.
that really helped a lot. And so I think from there, kind of just like having my name kind of in the stable of people that I've worked with before, really helps a lot.
Oh my God. You're literally like attracting all these people. Like you're
It's
like
like
literally
I
the
sound
embodiment of
very
like I don't
fancy, but
chase,
like I
I
don't.
attract, I attract all these like come here, DC executive, okay, editors that work with me, all the writers, the agent come over here. I'm not going to chase you. I'm kidding. But that's amazing.
No, it is like it does feel like I do feel very special, but like in all honesty, like all of the folks that I've worked with have been very, very kind and have like advocated for me in those spaces when I was new. And they all sound like kind of intimidating, like outside of the industry, but every editor that I've worked with across the board has been super, super kind and very helpful.
Hmm. Did you always know that you wanted to be an artist?
No. No, I was so sure that I like was like, you know what, like I'm like a fussy person and I like
Uh-huh.
spreadsheets. I'm not like a pretty terrible ADHD, but I'm like pretty organized to kind of make up for that when it
Yeah.
counts. So I like thought that I had the right skills to do administrative work and like work in offices and help organize things and not actually make my own work. But over the course of my life, like I just really liked to draw. Like it wasn't something that I like pursued super seriously because I just didn't see a career in it. And so when it became my job, it felt really strange. It was like I was like running away from it my whole life, trying to do the most responsible sounding thing. Like I basically wanted a job that my parents could explain to their relatives really
Yeah.
easily. But I wound up not doing that, and they're very happy for me.
Why do you think you like didn't see art as like the first choice?
But like I think literally because I didn't like my parents were brand new immigrants. Like we came over here when I was really like when I was a toddler. So I did grow up mostly in the United States, but because they didn't have like the same upbringing that I did, didn't have the same education, they just didn't have any access to resources in the arts and they didn't know how to look for that, even
Yeah.
though they wanted that for me. And so I kind of like took it upon myself with my very limited child resources to like go to the public library and figure out like all these things. And it's always such a long journey to find yourself artistically because you have to figure out what you like to do and what you like to make and what you like to consume and whether or not those are different things. And so I think for a long time, because I didn't know any professional artists, I just couldn't imagine a professional pathway. And as a matter of fact, like even though I'm here like now doing this job, like it's still really hard for me to be like, oh, like this is how you get a job in the arts because everybody's journey is so different. So yeah, no, I think literally it was just because I was kind of a dork and I was like, I can't imagine myself making money like this. And so I just never pursued it on purpose until I got to a tipping point where I was like, oh, I've decided to chase my dreams. And it was such like a like it was such a weird like cartoonishly like kind of like a Disney like I want song like like that moment where you're like I can go the distance. I had that moment while I was sitting at my desk job and I was like I think I kind of want my life to be a little different and I want to see what that looks like and I have people who've got my back so maybe I can take this risk and see where it takes me.
Have you seen that movie Soul from
I
Pixar?
have, yeah.
Wasn't there a scene? Wait, I don't know if that was Soul, but there was like a scene where some guy's like on a desk job and then something like he like realizes something. He's like,
I think
What
so,
am I
yeah. It's
doing
been a
with
while
my
since I've
life?
seen it, but that sounds familiar.
I just
Yeah,
imagine you
no, it was
doing that. I just imagine you doing that, and you start singing like, "I want to be a cartoonist" for some reason.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. That's basically what happened.
How long did it take for you to like create your first self-published comic?
Oh, I mean, well, I wasn't self-published. So the first, wait, are you
Okay.
talking about like my first like comic project ever, or was
Yeah,
it
like no,
like,
no,
or
not ever. Like your first original, your story and your drawings
oh
and
yes, my first graphic novel. So that
the magic
so after
fish.
the publisher acquired the book, so I was acquired by Random House Graphic, my editors, Whitney Leopard, and it was acquired by Gina Gagliano, who was the editor at the time, who's great. And I think the contract was like for like 2 years or something like that. And it took me like almost 3 years. It took me like 2.5 years to actually finish the book because it's a huge project.
Yeah.
And I'd never written a work of fiction before. Like I'd never written fan art or like fan fiction, like nothing, no fiction. And so it was very like daunting for me. And I'm a very competent writer. Like it's a skill that I had, but like understanding how narrative works is not something that I understood formally. It was something where I was like, oh, like I've seen movies and I've read books. I
Oh
kind
my
of know
God.
what a narrative arc kind of feels like. And so I was sort of intuiting my way through the process of it. And so it took me about
Mm,
6 months to write the script. And the scripts for graphic novels like are often like shorter than you would expect because a
yeah.
lot of the storytelling is done in the images, and then the book itself is something like 200-ish pages around there. And so it took me 6 months to actually write the script, and then it took me like basically like a year to like kind of pencil and do thumbnails and do all of that, and then it took me like a whole other year to do all of the drawings,
Oh my God, you did
to do the
everything?
inking.
You did
Yeah, I
everything?
did everything. Yeah, no, I wrote it and I drew it and I colored it. It was a very limited palette. Yeah. I don't, my favorite mode of working is when I can do everything. Like I like to collaborate sometimes, but for the most part, I like to work by myself and my editor.
Do you think, why do you think that? Is it because you're like a perfectionist? Because I kind of am.
A little bit, yeah. No. I am a little bit of a perfectionist. I have to learn how to get over it because because done is always better than perfect, and I want my editors to have a good experience with me, and so I want to hit my deadlines as hard as I can. But yeah, no, I generally prefer to work with to write and to draw and to kind of do everything because I like having full control over what the pages look like. And I've worked with some really fantastic comic writers who are very experienced comic writers. And so I've had to do very little like, oh, like I know where all the panels are because they can see, like kind of they can imagine how to organize all of these things. And I can
Yeah.
just kind of make their vision come forward and put my own little spin on it sometimes. But they've done like a lot of that for me because they're very good at it. But since The Magic Fish was traditionally published, and I now work with writers who like don't know how to write comic scripts all the time, a huge part of my job ends up being working with the editor to make sure that the script that they turn in is actually comics friendly. And so then now I'm like doing some editing also. And so it becomes a little bit of like I'm learning that this job requires me to do a million different things all the time, and they're always new. So it's always exciting, but you know, it's a little it can be a little tiresome.
Well, yeah, but I respect you because, man, you're so good at drawing. Like when I saw your art, I
Oh,
was
thank
like, it
you.
looks so. It's like if like I also love manga and anime, might because I'm Japanese, so I grew up watching those and I speak
Mhm.
Japanese. But when I saw your stuff, I was like, this is like if anime actually like cared about anatomies and tried to look a lot more elegant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I loved manga when I was growing up. There was some like one of my very first comics. So there was a comic that never made it over to the US, but I think it was translated into like Italian and French because the anime made it there too.
Yeah.
Called Pygmalion by Shinji Wada.
Mhm.
And it's like he died like a few years ago, but it's like a very old school like shonen manga, and I loved it so much. And I only had one issue, and it was translated into Vietnamese, and so I could only read it in that language. And so to this day, I don't know how that story ends, but it was such a huge influence on me going forward. And then I read a lot of like I like a lot of shoujo manga, and I like some like kind of seinen manga, like Oh My Goddess is one of my favorite manga series, and that ended relatively recently too. So I
Mm.
did a fair amount of reading of manga when I was growing up. So that made me very comfortable with like sort of a comic book format. And I didn't read a lot of American comics. I think my favorite American comics were all like newspaper comics. And so, like I read a lot of Calvin and Hobbes and I loved Snoopy and Garfield.
Yeah, it's funny. My only American comic experience is from, when you're like in elementary school, you go to the library and they have like a shelf of comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a kid who would never touch novels. I thought they were boring, so I would always go to a comic. So I remember reading like, have you ever heard of like Big Nate before?
I've never heard of Big Nate.
It's like literally like four panel comics and there's just a
hmm
bunch of them. So each page has like a little different short story, and I would eat that up every single
hmm
time.
Yeah, no, I love that format. That format was great. It was like the Garfield comics. Like those used to come in those like when I would go to the library, they had those big horizontal, like huge collections of Garfield comics, and I would just eat that up. I loved it.
I know. I was like, I'm kidding. So that's so nostalgic.
hmm
But I'm kind of curious, what's the Pygmalion, the story about? I've never heard of it before.
Sure. No, it's like I think it's a pastiche of the like Pygmalion story, sort of. Like it's sort of like a very typical hero's journey, and it's about like this small this small boy. I believe he's so the Vietnamese iteration of it named him Tete, and I believe that he's been localized as Kurt in some places, but I don't actually know the Japanese name of the character. But it's about this like it's set in sort of like Greek antiquity, so the main antagonist is Medusa, and I think she's like turned his village into stone or something, and he's trying to rescue them, and he makes friends along the way. It's apparently like a big influence on Berserk, which is so weird because like Pygmalion is for like it's for kids. Like it's very cute and gentle most of the time, but there are a lot of, like shonen action sequences in it too. But yeah, no, it's like a high fantasy story that I don't know the full plot to because I've only been able to read one issue of it.
Is that what started your like passion for comics?
I think so. It was like that and Garfield.
That's such
Because
a
I loved
random
I
combination.
know, like it's so weird, such a weird combination. But I think that's one of my favorite things about comics is that everybody comes to comics from very radically different places. And so you get people with like really like just fun combinations of influences. And
Mhm.
I kind of love what people come up with. But yeah, no, that Shinji Wada book, like because it was the first time that I saw images like American comics are like very elegant and very funny looking. Like they're very efficient and they have like a very like smartly done iconography, but they're not beautiful in the sense that like illustrations in fairy tale books are like beautiful. Like they
Yeah.
don't like revel in elegance. And manga was the very first instance where like I could read a story that was for me, like for someone my age at the time. I was like 7 or 8, and and it was beautiful and it was elegant and it was something that I felt was like aspirational as opposed to just like kind of funny. And so that really kind of inspired me to draw. Like I ended up drawing, lots of mermaids and fairies when I was a kid, just like in the margins of all of my homework. And the teacher started ignoring it because my grades were still fine. So they were like, "Yeah, you're probably okay."
You know what?
But
I'm
but yeah.
different. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm the opposite. I wasn't doing that well, so my teacher's like, stop drawing stupid go-tos on the corner of your math homework and actually solve the questions. And I was like,
Mhm.
but I don't know the
Yeah,
answer.
no, sometimes you just want to Kamehameha the math question and maybe it'll be done.
Exactly. Why can't I like Sharingan my way out of this, bro? No, that's Naruto. That's different. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, so your comics that you were writing during your work, right? What kind
Mhm.
of what kind of little stories were you writing?
Like when I was in school. Well, I wasn't doing like stories yet. Like I didn't have any sense for narrative
Or like
when I
like
was
for your like social media.
oh, yeah, no, I wasn't doing that during work. I was doing that like I had like a day job that did all like occupied all of my time and attention. Then I would drive home and then I would get to my work desk and then I would do little stories
Mm.
and stuff there. Yeah, no, they tended not to be super narrative. Like I think for the longest time I just did like little tiny illustrations that were disconnected from anything. I tried to do some sort of comic, but I realized that it didn't have the requisite knowledge to figure out how to plan a story. And so they never went anywhere because I sort of did it like webcomic style, where I wasn't very
Hmm.
organized. And I was just like, let's see where this goes. And sometimes you write yourself into a corner and you don't know how to write yourself out of it. And so,
Yeah.
it was but I still I loved doing that and experimenting because I like figuring stuff out and making mistakes. And sometimes things don't work and you have to start new things. And that's a very normal part of the process of figuring yourself out artistically. Like I
Mm.
used to feel really badly about it because I was like, God, why can't I finish a project? Why don't I know how to do this? And it turns out that being mad at yourself and messily working your way through it is a part of the process.
I think the best way to improve is by actually doing the thing, and getting the experience. And that's
Hmm.
exactly what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but I love to do it. So it's very easy to come out the other end and be like, oh, I have all these skills now. But no, that's what I was doing. It was very hard work, actually.
Have you ever faced writer's block or artist block?
Oh my gosh, all the time. Because I'm still relatively new to this, and so a lot of my process is also interrupted by consciously learning things. So there will
Mm.
be times where I will go through a project and I will realize that there's a gap in my skills that I need to fill if I want to make something that satisfies me professionally that everyone can be proud of because I'm, working with, my editors and marketing people and publicists, all of those people need to have something in their hands that we're all really proud of. And so I'm very oh, I don't know how to do this. I need to learn how to do this. But because I have attention issues, I'm going to, fall down Wikipedia rabbit holes and not know how to pull myself out until it's way too late and hours have gone by.
Yeah.
So just very normal artist problems. But I love learning how to do new things in my work, and I think that's part of what motivates me to get going. I know there are artists that I admire who are incredible draftspeople whose work I aspire to someday in maybe the next decade. But I'm very happy with where I am now because the process of learning is so much fun. And I also because I work for, my readership is relatively young. I don't want to put out something that's too perfect. I think part of the charm of working and being kind of new to it is that if you make a book and a young reader looks at it and they're like, oh, I could do that. I think some artists feel oh no, that makes it feel like my work isn't good, but I think that's really lovely actually because it becomes a conversation. It inspires someone to be like, oh, I bet I can do this too. It makes it feel accessible and reachable for someone even at that stage in life. I think that's really wonderful. So I've started to even let go of the little perfectionism in me because my young readers be able to look at my work and be like, I could do this. And I think that's great.
Yeah, that's you're giving people hope.
Mhm.
Are you targeting a specific audience? How old would you say your target audience
Well,
is?
most of my books are for a young adult audience, and I don't actually know what that means because I don't think about the age of my readers very often. Until I think I pitched The Magic Fish as a book for it was bought as a young adult book. But the
Mhm.
main character is a 13-year-old boy. And so I think technically that made it a middle grade book. And
Yeah.
so, as a compromise, I remember having this conversation where I was like, okay, so maybe if I made his mother also a protagonist, their ages can average out to be about the age of a young adult reader. And
That's
it
so
worked.
funny.
Yeah. But now I'm writing most of my main characters are teenagers. My next book is sort of a coming of age romance about high schoolers. And so I'm starting to think more about my readership now. But when I started, I was like, no, that's my editor's.
Okay. So did you ever have to do any self-promotion when you were doing this?
Yeah, and some of it makes me I don't love it's not my favorite part of the job. Because I think that artists are being an artist is one job and being an influencer is another job and doing
Right.
marketing and publicity is a job that's related to those things, but they're all different skill sets. And
Hmm.
I grew up with social media, and so I feel pretty comfortable, hopping on a Zoom call and doing this sort of thing, or doing a video of myself. But I hate to do that because I love doing interviews because it feels like a group project. I'm not by myself, but I get so self-conscious if I have to record a video to promote a thing or to make a promotional post. I still
Hmm.
get very uncomfortable doing that because I mean that's the whole reason why I got an agent. I was like, I don't like to advocate for myself, but I had to like it was just a skill that I needed to learn how to do. And I'm
Yeah.
going to have to do it soon because I have another book coming out and they're going to ask me to like make videos and do little social media posts. But yeah, no, and the social media felt very, like it felt very organic in the beginning because I didn't think that I was doing it as self-promotion. I was just doing it to share my work. And
Yeah.
so my audience grew very organically, like right at the beginning. So
Yeah.
it was kind of nice to sort of, it was a good way for me to ease my way into the practice of having to self-promote.
Hmm. What kind of thing does your agents do to like help you read your book, please, but in a nice
Yeah.
way?
Well, my agent's job is to facilitate the contracts between me and the publisher most of the time. And so if somebody has like a project for me, I'll send them through my agent. And she's fantastic. My agent is Kate McKean at Moorheim. And she does a really good job of answering all of my questions about the publishing industry because I have no idea how any of it works. And she's been an agent and an author for like a long time. And so she knows how the industry works. And so she's very good at kind of managing my expectations. And when I ask a question, she's like, oh, I think this is what you actually really want to know. This is important context. And so she's good on that end of things, but she's also very good at kind of like making sure that my working relationship with editors is really positive and looking over my contracts and making sure that they all look okay and that all of my rights like belong with me and that it's a kind of like a reasonable exchange.
Yeah.
And she'll advocate for me to like get a higher advance so that I get paid. And if my editors like haven't, like editors have a lot of books on their plate, and so if they like happen to drop the ball on a payment or something, she's going to be like, hey, you haven't paid my client yet. So it's just kind of someone who makes sure that I get paid and that I get treated well and that I have like a sense for where I'm going in the industry, which I find to be really valuable.
I didn't know that like you needed agents to be in comics until you
You
told
don't
us.
always have to, but like it helps for me because I don't work in monthly comics. I don't always work for DC and Marvel. And like I think a part of the thing with them is that like they have great name recognition and all of the people that you work with are fantastic. They don't pay you as much as traditional publishing pays you. And so when
Really?
I work with, yeah, and so when I work with DC and Marvel, I don't even involve my agent most of the time. Like I will if she wants to, if she's curious about learning how that part of the industry works. But
Mm.
she takes a cut of my like my advance payments for like all of the projects. Like she gets a cut of my work, and so if she can't negotiate a pay that's like high enough to be worth her time for that cut to be big enough for her, I don't want to waste her time doing that. And so if
Mhm.
I'm, getting a project with like Random House Graphic, like my advance would be substantial enough that she could make a lot of money advocating for me in that space, but an agent would not be able to make like it would they would end up making like 40 to like $100 for like a short project for DC or Marvel. Like it's not a lot of money.
Bro, that's like one dinner in an expensive, inflated country like Canada, which I
Hmm.
live in.
Yeah. No, it's like fancy coffee and like a snack. Like it's it's like not a lot. Like so I don't want to, but it's one of those things where like I will run most of these things by her if she like, because they're like agents are also learning how the industry works and publishing changes all of the time, and comics especially have seen enormous changes over the last decade or so. And so it's good to kind of like loop her in just so she kind of stays apprised at where the business is at. But most of
Mhm.
the time, if I'm working for DC or Marvel, I don't even loop her in.
What are some like things you learned making comics that you never like expected when you started? You're like, what? I have to do this? Or like,
Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of it has been taken care of by my agent because all of the paperwork is super overwhelming. So if I'm working for like a smaller, like if I'm working for like the big two, or if like I'm working for traditional like monthly comics or anything within that era, like the like superheroes or anything like that, I have to do all the paperwork myself, and that's annoying. So you have to like make sure all of your tax paperwork is like good to go, that you have your like W-9s and that they send you all of the correct like your 1099s or whatever.
mm,
Um, I think the other kind of more surprising thing that I've learned in my aspect is that my work is very different than a lot of my peers who do a lot more like intellectual property work. And so, they'll work for like I have a good friend who draws the like Avatar: The Last Airbender comics for Dark Horse. And so the way that he navigates, like marketing and publicity is very different than I do because he's not like the star of that show, really. Like he's someone who's sort of hired on to usher this property into the world. Whereas with me, like there's a lot of expectation that I have to like get out there and show up at schools and book festivals and conventions and events. To like talk to people and to like be have like a front stage persona and be outgoing, and that part of the job is still like relatively new to me and I don't love it, but I'm starting to become a little bit more skilled at it, so it's a process.
Were you like, are you more of an extrovert or an introvert?
Oh my gosh, I'm so introverted. It's very easy, like I actually don't think that has anything to do with like that aspect of my job actually, because I
Mm,
found that like if I have a reason to be there, if I can go into a space and be like, I'm here to promote my book or I'm here to talk about comics, I feel pretty energized. Like I don't feel like my energy is being sapped away by all of the socializing because I'll be there for a reason. I have a purpose.
mm.
But most of the time I'm very introverted.
Oh my God. Like, I'm kind of impressed though. How do you manage your time? That's my biggest struggle.
Oh, I'm not good at it. I'm very, very bad at it, actually. No, I like have to put every single thing I have to like put up on my calendar and I have to have a reminder for it. And I have to work really hard not to ignore the notifications that come up.
Mm,
Um, I think my like background in administration actually kind of helps because every time I have like a really big project, I make a spreadsheet that can help me calculate like my progress in it depending on like how many pages I've gotten done. I can just like put in the information and make sure that the formulas can like spit out like, oh, you have like this 60% done, you have this many pages left. So like making sure that I can sort of outsource all of that so that I have a really solid literal material idea of where I am in a project kind of really helps me because it stresses me out if I have a big project and I'm just like, I don't know how far I am in this project, but I've done so much work. So, finding ways to externalize all of the things that make me feel like I'm getting work done kind of helps motivate me to stay a
mm.
little bit more organized, but it's a struggle.
And also, especially, it's like you have to be like self-motivating because you're writing your own stuff for yourself, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. And so I have to believe in my work. I think a lot of it too is that like I am actually not super widely read when it comes to comics. I like the stuff that I like and I'll read the stuff that interests me. And sometimes like most of the time actually the stuff that I like to read is really different than the stuff that I like to make. And so I don't like compare myself to other people who are doing the same work. And so it really helps me in my confidence to just be like kind of Pollyannaing my way through things and not worrying about whether or not I measure up because I just don't care.
That's a good way to look at it. You know, it's kind of funny
Hmm.
because I feel the same way. I do read a lot of mangas. I read more in the past. Now I watch more like movies and like
Hmm.
shows. So when I write my comic, I see it kind of as like a very detailed storyboard rather than a comic, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do something like that too. And comics and movies have like it's had a very long history of kind of being developed alongside each other. Like I
Mm,
think about like there are a lot of movies kind of like in the middle of the century of the last century, like you're like Humphrey Bogart and like Lauren Bacall, like those like noir black and white movies that had
yeah.
a huge influence on pulp comics at the time. Like if you go back and like look at like Dick Tracy and like The Spirit and all those comics that came out like during that time, like before the Comics Code Authority, they took a lot of cues from like westerns and from like detective movies, like the dramatic lighting and like all of the like very like the interesting angles and the shots and like the ways the panels are composed have a lot to do with the movies that came out at the time. And so there's always been like this back and forth. And so like whatever it is, like if even if you feel like you're reading fewer comics, like you're still taking in a lot of visual information that is really helpful.
Wait, what's Comics Code Authority?
Oh my gosh, that's a thing in the US where like at a certain time. So there was this sort of puritanical movement
Mm,
that happened because people were like, oh, like comics are going to make children, like violent and ill-adjusted. And so like I don't know the history of it super, super well, but at a
mm,
certain point, comics had to be like watered all the way down and very, very like child friendly in a way that wouldn't offend very conservative parents. And so it changed comics. Like it destroyed, well, it didn't destroy, but like it really diminished horror comics as an industry and romance comics too. Like those just like all like either went away or like became very boring for a while. And that's when comics kind of got very goofy. But it was like and but then by like I think the 70s and 80s that came back, that all changed again.
You know, sometimes I do feel like I don't like the constraints, but I feel like when you have constraints, you can kind of like your creativity can flourish even more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. I love limitations because it makes you make interesting choices in different
Yes.
directions.
Yes. Do you have like examples of that?
Oh my gosh. Well, so in movies, there was a similar thing in movies too, where like in the silent era, movies were very raunchy. Like they were very like old movies, very like didn't have the same like strictures. But then like when movies became much more conservative and they had like a similar thing happened like culturally, like two movies. And so you'd end up with like so there are movies like His Girl Friday with Cary Grant,
Mm,
where because the characters can't like consummate their relationship. They can't have sex, they can't be sexual, but there needs to be an expression of sexual tension. And the way that that gets expressed in those movies is through slapstick. And so they talk really fast and then they do like a lot of really like physical comedy around each other. And so that kind of became an outlet. And so like that kind of form in movies was sort of a response to that. I think in my work in particular, like for the Magic Fish, this is a total like different direction, but like in the
yeah.
Magic Fish, if you've read it, there are I don't use a lot of traditional comic book language. And so I don't use a lot of action lines. I don't use like sound effects or anything like that most of the time. And movement is conveyed by, and gravity is also conveyed by like fabric and hair. And so the direction of the wind and the way the characters are going are sort of like you can see that in the characters' clothes and their hair and anything that's kind of loose on them because I'm
Mm,
not using like your like zoomy action lines. And that was a deliberate choice because I wanted readers who were new to comics to be able to find them very, very legible. And people who are reluctant to read comics kind of find like the superhero language of comics to be really confusing and chaotic. And so I like was like, this is not going to be language that I use in my comics. I'm going to find a different way to do it. And so I think that limitation really helped me make some fun choices in that book that I'm still really proud of.
You know, I think that's really good because one of my pet peeves in comics is when there's too much words. I'm like, is this a novel or is this a comic? Like, what am I reading right now?
Sometimes that can work, but I feel like, especially if you grew up reading manga, there are not a lot of words per page. It's mostly the pictures.
Mm,
So like I think we have like a much better like not better, but like I think we incline ourselves towards pages that have more pictures than words.
yeah.
But if you grew up on American comics, like or like just Western comics in general, like those Alan Moore comics, where it's like just like tons and tons of text on a page, like those can be really interesting to read. Sometimes they can be used really effectively, but as a reader, I don't like it.
Mm-mm. I don't like it either. Also, I feel like I'm more of a visual storyteller. Like sometimes I read my
Mhm,
webtoons episode. There's literally like a scene in my comic. I have a little poster right here. And
mhm,
like there's a scene where the character gets injured and she like drags her feet and she like tries to stand up and walk and there's like no words and that's like literally one episode. And I was like, "Oh my God, I
mhm.
can't believe she didn't say a single word. She said ah and that's it." You
Yeah,
know?
I feel like that happens a bunch in manga too, where like they're not like talking about things. Like that's such a like now that I'm working with other authors, like one of the things that I've noticed is that the show and tell thing is not like they can't decide which one they want to do. Like I think they understand in their heads that
Mm-hmm.
like the reader can see the character doing a thing in a comic, so you don't have to write the characters doing this thing in this comic, but they'll do it anyway.
They
And so
do?
it's yeah, and so it becomes up to me and the editor to be like, well, this is redundant. This doesn't need to be here. You can either make this a line of dialogue, or the reader can observe the character doing this thing, and that is also reading.
Mm.
So, so there's a little bit of like everybody struggles with it. Like I think even when I write comic scripts for myself, I find myself like in the editing stage being like, why did I write it like this? Like I know that there's going to be a drawing. And so it's not something that's super natural to a lot of people who like because I didn't grow up reading a ton of comics, it's something that I also had to learn how to do.
When you write for your comics, are you the type of person who has like a whole outline planned and then you
Hmm.
go into it, or are you just like whatever floats in my head, Akira Toriyama style, you know?
Oh, I need an outline. I need an outline so bad. I used to, I mean, because an outline is a lot of work, and so it feels very boring to like
Yeah.
go through it. But I need it. I need to have it done. Like I won't even start drawing until I have like the whole script actually done. And I'm like pretty flexible. Like the script can change like while I'm drawing if I feel like things would feel more dramatic or if I can make a more fun creative choice, like things
Yeah, me
like the
too.
script will change. But like
Mhm.
having a script that I can work from is like so important to me because not having that organizational scaffolding while I'm making the comic is a recipe for disaster. I will write myself into a corner and I won't know how to get out of it, and then I'll feel discouraged and then I won't pick up that comic again. And it just like it's good. It's better for me to be organized even though it's so much work for me.
Mhm. I have a fun question.
Mhm.
If you Do you have any like fictional stories that you feel would be something you'd want to be able to make someday?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so many. I love like there are so many classic fairy tales that I want to make into comics somehow someday. Like that's most of my work is that I love fairy tales and I want to make comics out of them and I want to tell them in this kind of like interesting new way.
Mm.
And so like one of my favorite stories is like The Traveling Companion. I think it's an Anderson story, but it's like a really like this guy's father dies at the very beginning of the story and then he meets a stranger and they travel together and then there's like a cannibal princess. Like it's a very like so many like weird old fairy tales that I kind of love. I've been really getting into Italian fairy tales recently. There's a translation volume of like oral tradition Italian stories by an author called Italo Calvino, who's also like a really fantastic fiction writer.
Mhm.
And I love a lot of those stories. And so kind of figuring out ways to bring them to life is something that I'm passionate about, but I also want to tell a lot of original stories too, because recently I've been watching like well, not recently. Over the
Yeah.
winter, I watched a bunch of Bewitched because I'd never seen that
Mhm.
show before, and it was really fascinating for me to see like, oh, like this show has a history of influencing like the magical girl genre in manga, and it has a lot of like spiritual progeny, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch kind of comes from this sitcom's like tradition. And so kind of like figuring all of that out and kind of letting that influence the kind of stories I want to tell is something that I'm working through right now.
So you're like drawn more towards like fantasy stories, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, I love fantasy. But that's like it's so weird too because like I also love just slice of life stuff. Like I think my first project I was like I need an excuse to draw something fantastical because I love fantasy. And
Yeah.
while I was drawing it, I was like, you know what, I really like drawing furniture. Like just like weird out of left field stuff where I was like, I've never considered that this would be something that I would enjoy drawing, but it turns out that slice of life stuff is stuff that I also really like to draw.
You know, wait, is this slice of life the stuff that you wrote for like your social media, like the little comics?
Yeah, yeah, some of that is slice of life. Like those like little journal comics are just little slice of life stuff, and I think those are really fun to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, my next book doesn't have any fantastical elements whatsoever. It's just about a girl in high school who's falling in love. So it's just very like everything
That's cute
is
though.
rooted in the real world. Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Are you more like drawn towards stories that are like, I think there's like not two types, but the two that comes
Hmm.
in mind is stories where the situation makes the character have crazy decisions and that's what makes it interesting versus it's like a normal world, but the character is crazy and that's why they
Hmm.
make crazy decisions. It makes it interesting. So which
Hmm.
one do you lean towards more, you feel?
Um, you know what? I don't think that I think about that very much when I'm making stories. Like I think a lot of the times like I think about like the character's journey the most. And so I don't tend to write from a place of like gimmick or like, oh, this is an unusual circumstance. Like I don't tend to do that. I
No,
like
me
stories
neither.
where yeah, yeah. So I'm very much like like I like the stories being rooted in some place sort of relatable, like at least emotionally. And so I don't like end up doing like a lot of like gags or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I really like that kind of mode of storytelling, mostly because like it sounds boring on the surface, but it's also one of those instances where like as an author, you have to realize that your readers are bringing their experience to the page, and so it'll mean something different to them. and they're going to bring experiences that you don't have that'll kind of like make that reading experience different than the experience of creating the story. And so their relationship to it is going to be very different than yours.
Mm,
And that's really wonderful. That's actually kind of like beautiful because you get to have conversations about it and you get to kind of see where people are coming from when your story is a little bit more staid and not quite so out there.
this is not for my comic, but I used to go to like when I was younger, I went to film school. And I remember I wrote a script and then
Hmm.
my teacher analyzed it and you're like, "Oh, you did a metaphor for this and this and this, right?" And I was thought to my
Hmm.
brain like, "No." But
Yeah,
but
no.
I wanted him to like pass my script because I liked it and I didn't want to change it anymore.
Mhm.
So I was like, "Yeah, I totally went for that. That was my
Yeah,
intention all
no,
along, guys."
that's a great example of that actually, because like so many readers will like bring their own stuff to it, and you don't expect the things that they read into it. And sometimes it'll be stuff where you're just like, I don't know where you're getting any of this. And sometimes they'll make an observation about your work where you're like, oh, I do think about that a lot. Actually, I wasn't intentionally putting it in here, but I guess it made its way in there anyway because it was important to me. And it's
Mhm.
really cool to kind of like be reminded of what your priorities are because a reader was like, hey, look at this cool thing.
hmm Like also sometimes I notice it's very important for me to get people to read my stuff because my first like the first part, right? So when people read it, they're like, "What the hell is going on here?" And I'm like,
Hmm.
"What do you mean? You're supposed to understand this and that." And I'm like, I realize, oh my God, my readers can't read my brain cells. They just look at the
Hmm.
comic and they're confused,
Yeah.
you know? So I feel like
Hmm.
it's important for people to read so that you understand what's missing because in your brain it makes sense. But no one can like
Yeah.
look in there and realize like, oh, that makes sense. If that
Hmm.
makes
Yep. Yeah, no, that's what my editors are for. They're very good at it. They're like, why didn't you, what am I missing here? It's really
Do you
nice to
ever
have
have
that working relationship.
mm-hmm. Did you ever have like those moments where the editor said, "Can you change this?" and you were like, "No, this is important for me."
I mean, yes, but like they're also not as big a deal as you think. Like all of the notes that I've gotten back from my editors, like and like I wish that I would like I'd get more notes from my editors actually because I find them to be really helpful. My editors are very smart people with good feedback. Um, and so whenever I get notes, like I'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. I want to make this change. If I don't want to make a change, I just like I'm like, oh, like I actually kind of quite like this here. So if it's not that important to you, I'm gonna keep it the way that it is. And I've never like it's never been a fight. Like I've
Mhm.
never had a situation where like an editor was like, no, this must change. I think it becomes like it's probably more common for like working in IP comics. Like if it's my own original story, I think the editors just kind of trust me to know that this is my vision. But if you know,
Yeah.
if you're working for like Marvel or DC, the editors are going to be like, well, these characters wouldn't do that, or like this doesn't serve this broader story that's happening at the time. So like you, it depends on the kind of work that you're doing. But I've always had like a really positive experience. Like even in my IP comics, like when I did a an online comic for Marvel where
Mhm.
I wrote and drew the like Karma and Love like short like Valentine's Day special, and it was like that felt a lot like traditional publishing because my editor was very like good about what I needed. I would ask for like, hey, like what characters are available, like what makes sense. Do I need to worry about their power levels or whatever? And I didn't. So it was like it's always been like a nice experience. Like I think having a good relationship with the editors kind of helps me trust them and communicate with them effectively. And they're all like at at the point where they're working in that capacity, they're good at their jobs. They know what they're doing, and I like have never had an issue. Like I've never had like a contentious
Mhm.
argument with an editor over anything creative. It's always been like this serves the story really well. Or if it's just a change that I don't want, I'm just like I don't want it, and they're like that's cool.
That's so good. You know what? That's like the dream, not arguing with your I feel like sometimes I'm very like prideful of my stuff and I end up like clashing with my co-writer.
Hmm.
But I feel like there's no point of having a second person if they think exactly like you, right? So I think it's
Right,
getting
yeah, you do need that difference. Yeah, no, and I think just like having trust in your creative partner or like whoever it is that you're working with is really, really important because I know that they want the work to be the best that it could possibly be.
Mhm.
And like my editors are also very clear that like this is my project and it's not their book. Like it is
Yeah,
a book that they're working on, but like they want to make sure that my creative vision is front and center and that it becomes something that we can all be really proud of. And so I trust them whenever they give me feedback because I know that they want it to be good.
that's the beauty of having your own work being the star, right?
It helps. I think it does help.
Do you have like any goals past becoming a comic? Like, you know how like Invincible became a show and The Walking Dead
Oh
became a
yeah.
show? Do you ever want that?
I don't actually. It's not something that I'm trying to like like I know like a lot like there's a lot of comics and like film and television crossover.
Hmm.
It's not my goal because I love comics. Like I really like the format and I like working in this space and it's an art that I like to do. So I don't and like if I want my work to be adapted or if someone like offers to adapt my work, I would want for them to be like just as passionate in their medium, but I am not that's not something that I'm gunning for.
You know, it might happen because you're already attracting like 90% of everything.
I
So,
mean, I think like every like comics person, like a lot of authors have had, I mean, because the film industry is always looking for new projects, and so most of us have already had a few conversations about our work being adapted, but it is so difficult to make anything that
yeah.
usually it doesn't get past the like first conversation. Like most of the time, from what I understand, like they'll like as far as some projects go in development is that a company will like buy the film rights to your work and then they'll like sit on it for a few years or like they'll get funding or whatever and then they'll like be in talks for it for a long time but like they'll have the like rights to that option of your work and then they won't do anything with it and then the rights will return back to you in a number of years or whatever that looks like and if someone else wants to pick it up then they'll pay you again like it's not often that those things actually materialize as a film project, you know?
I see. So, has that happened to you before?
Mhm. Yeah, I've had a couple of conversations with folks who are like, "Hey, this would be really good if it was adapted into this like into a like movie or a TV show."
Hmm.
And most of the time I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds really nice. If this goes anywhere, then, you know, let me know."
And then so far it hasn't happened yet, but maybe it will.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe someday. I'm not against it. It's just not my goal.
But it's still cool. I think that's so cool. And
Mhm.
clearly, you know, you literally like basically from what I've heard so far, you drew amazingly, you worked really hard, and people saw
Thank
that and they're
you.
like, I need to work with this guy right now. And that's amazing. I think that's
Oh, I hope
amazing.
that's how that went. I really
That's
hope
how I
so.
see it. That's how I heard it. So,
Okay.
okay, so Trung, I have
Mhm.
one last question.
Okay.
What's one advice you give to the aspiring storytellers, like comic writers, or people who just want to, you know, be professional?
Um,
What would you give them?
sure. I think the most general advice that I give is to like not be afraid to make mistakes. Like you should make work that's really messy, that is like that doesn't work all of the time. Like make decisions that you feel are interesting and like try to figure out like learn from those mistakes. Like you should make a lot of mistakes because that like really speeds up the learning process.
Hmm.
And and like doing that will make you a little bit less self-conscious about your work. Like caring about what strangers think about your work is like such a trap. It's really difficult, especially today with all the social media. You're gonna get a lot of unsolicited feedback from strangers. And I think that like the thing that you have to understand is that you are developing your own personal taste and your own eye first. And so being able to trust your own vision is super important because that helps you have a positive relationship with your collaborators and it helps internet feedback from randos just like not affect you very much
Hmm.
because you can just be like, well, I don't work for you. You're not my editor. You're not my collaborator. And I don't trust your vision. I don't know who you are. So,
Hmm.
like, you know, being messy and like figuring out your own vision and then like finding people whose creative vision that you trust so that you can like really shore up an understanding of your own taste is so important.
That was so well said, man. That
Oh,
was
good.
really
I felt like I was rambling.
no, I was like being like inspired right now. That's so true because everybody has a different, you know,
Mhm.
opinion of their comics. Some people hate some shows, some people love that exact same show. So my
Hmm.
motto is that if you like writing or making it, someone else will like reading it.
Hmm.
Well, where can our awesome listeners find your work, Trung?
Oh, okay. So my website is trungles.com, trungles.com. I'm very easy to Google. But yeah, no, that's where you can find all of my work, and my links to my social media are all through my website. I've stopped using Twitter, but I'm still occasionally on Instagram, and I technically have a Tumblr, but I use Blue Sky a lot these days.
Mm.
So, I'm around.
You can also like click it in the description because I probably put it in there.
Oh,
Should have.
yes.
If I didn't,
Yeah.
there's a problem. You should comment like you forgot it, but there's no way I forgot.
Yeah, I'll be in the
Well,
comments to just be like, Sophia, you forgot to do this thing.
yes, exactly. Remind me, guys. I'm a little goofy and like forgetful sometimes, but I try my best. So, well, that's a wrap for today's episode of Podcast for Fun. Thank you so much, Trung, for joining us and sharing your incredible and fun insights. I was like entranced and I looked at the clock and I was like, oh my God, time flies so fast, you know? And to our
Yeah, thank
listeners,
you so much for having me.
yes, you should come back again. I'm just saying. I have more questions, so. Well, to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, and I bet you did because I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with fellow storytelling enthusiasts. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to explore, you can drop them in the comments or connect with me on any of my social medias at Podcast for Fun. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and we'll see you on the next episode of Podcast for Fun.